Hello again, Steve here, and tonight I wanted to talk about the unfortunate, very, very unfortunate burning of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and maybe a few comments on what maybe we can learn about this very unfortunate event. Just so you know, I did actually visit Notre Dame back in the late 80s, early 90s on a backpacking trip through Europe, and even back then it was really a shell of its history. It was basically a tourist trap, from what I can see. There was a lot of street bums hanging around the front, and I even saw a naked woman lying near the river close by, and so on. It wasn't. It was Paris. It was a former the former even Paris itself was a former shell of in itself of the old gay Paris in a way. It lost its luster. It was a little bit of sort of too much trying to accept everybody, I guess, and it lost its edge. It looked kind of dirty and whatnot. So it doesn't surprise me that buildings would fall into decay under such circumstances. But to see something like this go down in a few hours is really really gut wrenchingly sad. I would say, a thing that stood for what 800 years or whatever is just gone. You know, and there's some talk, I guess, from people who have comments on this, and very thought out comments, some of them about the likelihood that it's not an accident. The thing was under construction, and there's supposed to be lots of regulations on safety and all this sort of stuff, and the fire started after it was closed, after work, and so on. I mean, we don't know, right? And I would say, having worked in industry for a long time, even though there are regulations, lots of regulations at times, things happen that are contrary to the regulations. I can remember, for example, when I worked on ships out on the west coast, we weren't supposed to pump oil overboard from the bilges, but we did it all the time at night. I mean, we weren't supposed to pump raw sewage over the side, but when the sewage system wasn't working properly after dark, we pumped the sewage. I mean, the regulations were in place. I mean, big penalties if you got caught, but stuff happens. Stuff doesn't just happen. People make decisions to do stuff counter to this if they think they can get away with it. I mean, maybe it's possible that something was smoldering, and somebody did all the checks and so on and thought that things were done right, and then it went up in flames. That is a possibility. Especially if it was under construction. And just because it happened after, well, things can smolder for quite a while in the walls, especially to do with electrical work and stuff like that, right? And the other thing, too, is that there has been a degradation, I would say, in the quality of workmen, because of all the diversity mandates and so on. I mean, I've seen it before where in a job site that I was in, they were just hell bent on hiring a woman for a certain job. And 4 or 5 guys were put in their application, and they were told, basically, go ahead and put it in, but we're hiring a woman for this job because there's not a woman represented here. So this woman got this job not because she was the best qualified. It's just because she was a woman. And I there's lots of smart women out there, but when you say we have to hire somebody because of X and we're going to ignore the merit, well, where do the smart guys go? They go somewhere else, I guess. I don't know, because there's no job for you. We need to have somebody of everybody. We need to have so many women and so many of this and so many of that. And I can remember another job site I had. They sent out a survey asking people what their ethnic origin was. I remember one guy, he was born during the bombing of Dresden or whatever. He marched a beeline up to the Human Resources Office and reamed them out. How dare you pass out a thing like this? That's what they used to do in Nazi Germany, he said. How dare you do this? But because they had mandates, right? And of course, if this stuff is accidents are going on, and it's pointed out by somebody that it could be the result of all this diversity hiring, you get labeled as racists and so on and everything, and things get swept under the rug. I've got another story, and apparently there was other arson fires at churches around France fairly recently. And who knows who's doing this sort of thing. But if it's one of the protected classes of people who the French government has done all they can to bring in as many as they can, and they're embarrassed to admit that, hey, maybe we made a big mistake because we've got a lot of problems going on, so they keep it under the rug. Years ago, I lived in a certain city where there was a firebug going around, and a couple of houses were set on fire. One night we were at a party, and this person showed up, said they were a friend of somebody else, whatever, but nobody really knew who the hell she was. And a couple hours later, the friggin' bathroom of the house is on fire. So we were able to put it out. We called the cops because this was happening in the same area where all these firebugs were going on, and there was announcements on the news that, if you hear of something happening, if you see any suspects, whatever, call in, tips, where you can be anonymous and what have you. And yeah, we called in and nothing ever happened to this person. They never got back to us to ask more details. But this person was one of those protected classes who nobody wants to talk about, right? So that could possibly be. And the other thing too, that it was probably, a lot of people say, well, it's probably an arson. Well, I mean, one of the things that I would start looking for, and maybe getting information from people who are nearby, maybe people have had video, footage that'll come out in the next few days, like independent stuff that'll get put forward. Was there an explosion? Was there, and that could be a sign of some sort of a gas leak in the building, that there was ignition then of some sort of ignition source. Like that could have possibly been, because if it goes up in smoke that fast, that seems to indicate some sort of accelerant. Because I don't know about you, but I've lit lots of fires, and you can't just throw a match on something. I mean, you got to go to work to light something. I mean, you try to light a fire, and it goes out. Even if it's dry wood, you got to have kindling there, and you got to have a little bit of paper and tinder and everything else blow on it. You really got to baby it for a while to get it going. You can't just throw, but if you have a lot of accelerant, you have a bomb, if you have a gas leak or whatever, then you can cause enough heat to get it going. So I would listen for whether there was some sort of an explosion noise that took place, or all of a sudden a lot of smoke started coming out. That might indicate that there was some sort of an accelerant used, either deliberate or accidental, right? And I would say it's, and the other thing that's interesting too, I haven't noticed this, but some people are saying that there's a lot of cheering online in comment sections by certain people around the world, like lots of it, that this church has gone down in flames, which is rather disturbing, extremely disturbing. Maybe not surprising, but definitely disturbing. Another point I wanted to make too is that what's happening in a place like Paris is an example of sort of end civilization, when a civilization gives up on its own heritage and just invites anybody to come in and take over, right? And it's hard to blame those who are coming in. I mean, hey, why would you blame them? If it's a better life for them, they're going to come in. But if there's a fault for it, it's the people who live there, who've built it up, or their ancestors built it up, and they just let all kinds of people come in, and the whole thing begins to decay. I'm not saying it's these people who burned it down, but the decay in general. So, for example, I was in central Mexico not long ago, in these old cities that were built by, Spanish colonials, right? Beautiful, absolutely gorgeous architecture, which from a distance looks beautiful. But when you get up close to it, you can see pieces falling off the building. You can see chunks of, carved stone that has fallen off and is not repaired, and pigeons shitting on everything and so on. And it begins to look very decayed. And you can realize that it's only a matter of time that this city, on the trajectory that it's on, will once again become the wilderness. It's falling apart, right? And that's what's happening in France right now. This collapsing of the Notre Dame, which you could say is kind of like the heart, a symbolic heart of France, has collapsed. And in a way, it's one more example of a Western civilization which has, for whatever reason, fallen into disarray, fallen into decadence, and left itself wide open to be taken over. And those who take it over won't take care of it because it's not their heritage. They might even cheer when it's destroyed because maybe they want to build their own there. So, what is Paris now? Paris if it wasn't the Eiffel Tower. But the Eiffel Tower was only a little over 100 years old. It's more symbolic of the industrial age in France. But the heart of the Christian civilization of France, which was really, you might say, the heart of the late stage Holy Roman Empire, has collapsed to the ground. What can we learn from this? Well, I think, once again, coming back to it, what we can learn about this is just thinking for ourselves. And are we going to believe the narrative that we're told, that it was just an accident? Like one commentator I was listening to said, even if it was just an accident, even if it was, which is an opinion in and of itself so far, because who knows, right? Even if it was, why did that accident happen? My guess would be, which is just an opinion, is that there's decay in the workmanship, in the attention to workmanship. Because this individual was talking about how for hundreds of years there were candles all around this great cathedral to light the place. That's how they lit it before electricity for hundreds of years. 700 years or whatever. Candles. And it didn't burn down. And now it burns down. I mean, think about the workmanship to build that. Is it possible that workers can be that absent-minded to burn this thing to the ground that took, what was it, 100 and something years to build, and it stood for more than 800 years, and it's burned down in a couple of hours? The whole thing doesn't make much sense. There's got to be an explanation. It's either deliberate, or it's the result of, I would say, the decay of attention. Maybe we'll never find out. Maybe we will. But I think it's a time to mourn, really, in a way, if we're nostalgic at all. And it's also a time to really think and to consider. Do we really believe what we're told? We saw a great cathedral go up in flames. We'll be told all kinds of reasons why this happened. But I don't think we'll be told by the mainstream the real truth, as we're usually not. So it's a call to think for ourselves and to value, I think, what's really important to us. Steve here again, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. Talk again soon. Bye for now.